Hello, everyone. Welcome to Uncommon Conversations, episode 18. Today we have Russian Troll Gang on today. I actually don't know his name, but I will be finding out soon, luckily. We're going to talk about all sorts of interesting things. It's going to be one of the more politically deep podcasts, but trust me, you guys are going to be happy that you joined in, you tuned in, and or watched later, and I feel like we're going to gain some ground in this conversation. There's going to be some interesting and new topics and points explored. We'll see, but I feel like that is quite possible. So, some housekeeping notes. um, I'm going to turn comments off for the main duration of this. Hello. Oh, that's cool. You're from Norway. I'm going to keep comments off for the main duration of this podcast, and at the end, I will take questions. Hello, sir.
How's it going, brother?
Good, man. Good. It's good to have you on. I enjoyed when we didn't have too much direct back and forth on that one live, but I did enjoy having an ally on there, someone who
Yeah.
knew that I was not making up stuff. That was very nice. Um, and yeah, you obviously are a dank memer, a badass memer in your own right. And my brother was particularly, my younger brother, he's 17. And he was particularly pumped that we were going to do this. So I was like, right on, that's cool. I'm cool
Hey,
in my
man.
brother's eyes. I'm like, yeah, this is how we do
Hey,
it.
whatever I can do to help strengthen family relationships, bro, that's what I'm here for.
It's all about the family, bro, for sure. Yeah, yeah, deepening those ties. So would you, first off, what is your first name, sir?
Angel.
Angel. Okay, cool. That'll be easy to remember. Um, could you give me a brief sort of intro on your political upbringing, basically, and blossoming into adulthood? And how old are you?
I'm 37.
37. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was born to a working class Latino family in a deep blue district to a single mother. I grew up with a lot of the same notions that these such social justice warriors have now. I was at heart a social justice warrior, and I believe a lot of them don't really have bad intentions. I didn't have any bad intentions when I was younger. But some of that rhetoric and stuff, especially about like white people and oppression, that tends to leak in with all of that type of stuff. Like even if you got a bleeding heart, if you don't protect your mindset, if you're not developing your own strong mindset and value, it's easy for others to place their values in you. So I bought into a lot of that junk when I was younger, but a lot of it also had to do with like me being half white myself and never knowing my father. I kind of had like a personal, I guess, vendetta, you could say. So I think that impacted my viewpoint for a while. But I just, I kind of grew to the point of realizing that, yeah, bad things happen. Yeah, there's obviously social issues that we can address, but I didn't agree with any of the grassroots movements and the way they were going. I was supported BLM in the beginning of 2011, 2012, when it first kind of started coming around in the Obama administration. But it was mostly because I don't agree with police brutality. I don't think anybody does. I came to the conclusion that these people that were against the Black Lives Matter rioting in Ferguson and destroying all that property, obviously they don't support police brutality, and I had no um, I didn't support the riots or anything like that either. I mean, if it gets to that point, it gets to that point, but I didn't feel it got to that point. These people were busted in from outside communities. It really changed the way I looked at the movement. I started, and also I did have a pretty um, impacting red pill moment. I knew that like the media was fake. I knew the media manipulated us. I knew I never trusted the establishment. I was never registered for any political party. Still am not. But I did have a close friend who served in the Iraq War, and he was a staunch Republican. And his dank memes and red pill shit posting on Facebook led me to believe that maybe he was kind of racist. But I didn't care because he was a cool guy in person. And I'm like, well, he never says nothing to me in person. He's cool with everybody that I see. Even I remember one of the first times we hung out. He was a client of my fiance at the time, who was a massage therapist, And I remember the first time we hung out, after like the third time we'd been to his house, you were leaving. He goes, "Hey, I love you guys. You know, I just want to tell you I love you." And I was just like, it's kind of weird for you to say like you don't. He says, "No, you don't understand." He's like, I've lost so many friends. I never got the chance to tell them I love them before they left. You know, the war back home. He's like, I promised myself I'd never, let that opportunity slip by. So if you're welcome in my house and you leave, I'm gonna tell you I love you every time because I don't know if it's the last time I'll see you. And I was like, man, this guy's a really good guy. So I couldn't see that he was like a white supremacist or support police brutality, nothing like that. So I shared a story one time on my Facebook page from, I believe it was Occupy Democrats of all pages. And I
I've been
was
following
just,
them for a long time. I know
yeah,
what's
me
up.
too. Me too. And I saw this post they did about an article, a story in California about a young 12-year-old Hispanic kid, 13-year-old Hispanic kid, shot and killed by police because he had a toy gun. And I was like, oh, come on, they bullshit. They killed him because he was brown, blah, blah, blah. And then I've shared the story and made a rant about it in my triggered state of mind. And I get a message from this friend. He's like, hey, man, he goes, they're lying to you about that news story. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the police officer that was involved in that shooting is a friend of mine. I served with him in Iraq, and he's really torn up about it. And he doesn't know what he's going to do. Like, he's real messed up. He feels so bad. And he starts sending me photos of the crime scene. Brother, what I saw was what looked like a full grown man. I mean, this kid was huge, 180 pounds at least, bald headed, tattoos, wearing Dickies, and like just like a cholo gangster. And laying next to his body was a complete replica of an AK-47, not a toy gun. Had it been me and he had pointed that at me, I would have shot the kid. That's the first thing I thought. I was like, fuck, that gun looks real. I would have shot that kid. And it changed my idea completely. And I said, well, they're not putting these details out in the story. They completely warped the story to make it sound like they just murdered the child. So that
See,
was
I
the,
had never done I had never done the deep dive on that story. We all have certain stories that sort of teach us that lesson that it's not always what it seems.
yeah,
You got to look a little deeper. But that particular one, literally up until just this moment, I was under the impression that some cop just kind of pulled a psycho moment for whatever reason, and like a clear kid, a little 8-year-old, you assume a
yeah,
little itty bitty person with a
yeah,
little itty bitty fake toy gun.
yeah.
That's the picture. That's
They're
not
really, the thing
not
is,
the reality.
they're really good at taking images and putting them in our head. You see the media, the establishment, the elitist, and I'm going to use all these terms specifically because this is correct terminology. I'm not saying this in a conspiracy theory way. This is
You're
literally
one of the few people that I would never ever assume you're saying any of these things to like get brownie points with the anti
right.
woke community.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a lot of people that do sort of throw those words out there, or want us to talk about cabals or whatever. They know right what words to throw out there to sort of describe things,
And
and
it,
they
and if
play
you
that.
ask
And
them
I don't
if
think
you ask them who is they, what do they say?
I don't
They
know.
know, yeah, they know what they're talking about. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when I say this, I mean I know exactly how this works, and we'll get a little bit into that more into the live. But basically, they have a profoundly deep understanding of the psyche of human nature, and they utilize that to their advantage. So they can manipulate us in ways through imagery in a fashion that is um, extremely effective and efficient in creating like a mass perception of a specific incident. We see this time and time again. When you're kind of under the spell of it happening, you're unaware of it. The reason why is because they take a lot of measures to make sure that people are placed into a specific brainwave state, which is called a delta or a beta brainwave state. If you're in an alpha brainwave state, you're being creative, which means you're coming up with a narrative. You're thinking on your own. When you're in a beta or delta brainwave state, it's different. You're very susceptible, especially in a beta brainwave state, which happens every time you turn on the TV, you're watching a video, when you're absorbing information. The reason comfortable is sit in front of the TV and just leave it running is because kind of when people say it's kind of doing the thinking for you, no, that's exactly what it's doing because you're put in a beta brainwave state and you're the secondary actor in that activity. The primary actor is the
The
child.
primary cognitive narrative structure at play is the one being fed to you, not the one internally.
Correct. So, and I grew up in a Christian household with my grandparents, and they used to be very strict about what we could see, what we could read. And I just looked at everything as entertainment. But my grandparents were like, no, you're allowing certain types of spirits into your house, into your mind. And the way I look at it is, it's just programming. That's why they call it programming. And your brain is a computer, and you can be programmed. And they can also slip a virus in there somehow. And that's pretty much what we've been seeing happening over generations since the advent of radio and television.
Yeah, I think after World War II, the intelligence community, and you could even understand after what happened with World War II, the intelligence community took extra measures to figure out how to understand the mind, understand how we got to a level of a Nazi Germany happening. And I think once you have that knowledge and you have people behind the scenes, secret government, secret budgets, secret operations, they have
Yeah,
the time and the decades to study these things. Some people's gonna get it. Someone in that area is gonna get a hold of that and try to use that towards their own means. And
sure.
you also have private sector research on how to manipulate consumers, which is sort of
Yeah. The
overlaps almost with the exact same sort of intentions.
Well, I mean,
It's
a
just
lot of people don't
within a
realize it.
capitalistic context.
A lot of people don't realize this, but what you just mentioned, both the government sector and private sector in mind manipulation to marketing, psychological hacks, those are intertwined because they literally originated from the exact same source. I've been in sales and marketing for over 10 years. And one of the people that I researched when I was in sales and marketing was a man named Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays was a psychologist, but he had a very famous uncle from Vienna, Austria, which my uncle's actually from Vienna, Austria also. But his uncle was Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud, is known as very well as the father of modern psychology in many ways. And his nephew, Edward
And
Bernays,
he was
came to
he
the
was the
United
person who
States.
essentially discovered the subconscious, just so people understand how much ahead of other people he was in that era. He was basically
Yes,
the first person to articulate it that way.
yeah, he even created his own complete, I guess you could say, field of psychology. Because if you go into psychology in school, one of the things that people ask you when you become a psychiatrist or a psychologist is, are you Freudian or are you Jungian, right? You have Carl Jung and then you have Sigmund Freud. So I mean, these are men who were pioneers in the field altogether.
That's an
So
important binary. We'll get back to that sometime later on.
yeah, well, I'm sure we'll circle back.
Circle
And
back.
but yeah, so what's interesting with Edward Bernays and his journey to the United States is not only did he come here and have a probably single-handedly the most influence on our marketing and advertisement industry, but he also worked with the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which was the precursor to our current Central Intelligence Agency, right? So some of the things that he had taught now, and you may not realize it, but this type of tactics has been used on the masses for almost over 100 years now. It has affected people's lives. It has cost people their lives. It's caused massive damages to the population. Nobody's ever been held accountable for it, and government and corporations both utilize this and manipulate this in the same way. Nobody's been held accountable in over 100 years. So we are at a very bad disadvantage when it comes to this type of psychological warfare. One of the programming projects he did with the tobacco industry was tied directly into the feminist movement. And this is when they were teaching women that being independent and strong was a sign of that was smoking cigarettes, right, to rebel against society. And he literally came up with the slogan "Little Torches of Freedom" to describe cigarettes, and that's how they marketed to women, which cost countless of women their lives when they died of lung cancer. I mean, you're talking about millions of people in decades. So yeah, this is definitely not something that we should take lightly.
So is that what Tom McDonald references when he mentions that in his music? He talked about us being sold tobacco since we're 18. Do you think he's referencing sort of this deeper formal history of forcing us into
Sure,
that,
the regulations of
or
how
just sort
big
of vague?
tobacco, yeah, like the regulations of how big tobacco has been able to market has changed over time because these little sneaky practices. But I remember when I was a kid and the ice cream man would come to our neighborhood, they used to sell these little candy cigarettes. So it was kind of like, yeah, you're marketing to young kids to get them going. I guarantee you that, and we'll talk more about this in a larger aspect soon in this live as well, but I guarantee if you were to like look up these candy cigarette manufacturers, there was funding or ties to someone somewhere that was involved with big tobacco, who was also going to be profiting when these kids became older and were addicted to cigarettes. You got that oral fixation, had put something in
Hmm.
their mouth, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. They one of the interesting things. So when it comes to fiction, I'm a big fan of extremely sophisticated bad guys because it highlights something that many people, for some reason, don't think exists, and that's the idea that you can be hyper competent and completely evil.
Hmm.
And for some reason, like we have this conception that like being good at something is also means you're a good person because they are both the word good, I guess. I don't know. But there's definitely that idea there, and I like those characters because as someone in real life who's oriented towards the good, or trying to be as best as I can, as best as I can discern it, those people that are the extremely sophisticated bad guys that are operating behind closed doors and that have had decades and unlimited resources to structure things, um, that level of seriousness and rigor is what should be brought out in guys like you and guys like me to like say we need to be that's our competition basically.
Yeah.
That is our competition. Like there is no getting around that. So having that conception and understanding you got to be not evil but that ruthless in some sense, that much of a get after it,
Yep.
blood and
It
the
comes
taste of blood in your mouth kind of
kind
a
of
kind of a thing. You got to take
comes
it
down
seriously.
it comes down to tenacity and persistence, right? Because that's what's going to win the game every time. I'll tell you, in the professional world, if you were to ask 90% of CEOs how they made it to the top, they can't tell you they were the best at anything ever along the way, but they showed up when the other guys didn't. And over the last century or centuries, millennia, you've had a lot of people with a drive to want to control their fellow men. I mean, straight up psychopaths. And those guys show up while the regular people were making excuses about too busy being at work. Their mindset is so constrained that they're just thinking about me and my children, me and my house. Just if I'm in my house and everything seems okay, I don't care about what's going on outside in the world. And that's the exact mindset that they want most people to have. That's how they're able to subjugate populations. Um, they have the drive to go out there. They're showing up every day. Look, the CIA, the cartels, the terrorists, the bad guys, everybody, they're showing up every single day with a mission. They never lose focus of that mission. And regular people are just asleep at the wheel. I mean, people in the general population can talk all the trash they want about sleepy Joe Biden, but you guys are like sleepy Netflix watchers and sleepy,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're just as long as we got our provisional comfort, we don't really give a crap about what's going on outside of that. And slowly over time, things change. One day we walk outside the world and we're like, oh my God, the taxation, the high gas prices, and that, yeah, what's going on? How did we get to this point? Well, you haven't been paying attention. And even those that have been paying attention have been constrained by a fear of not having a plan to put into action to know what to do. And that are some things I want to touch on today with you.
Yeah, yeah. People need to understand, like, and pay attention to anyone who was aware of and talking about the dangers of wokeism back in 2015, 2016, when Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, and all them they were kind of making their their big stamp on the world and all that, and the intellectual dark web sort of was born and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. Though that was 5, 6 years ago, and we saw this kind of stuff coming. It started really, I think, in 2014 is when is when we started seeing like universities and like the Antifa, Black Lives Matter. We just saw like a different level of intimidation and violence coming from against the right wingers, and it was specifically, in my opinion, in response to the alt right movement. Because for a
Sure.
period of time, the alt right movement was not white nationalist in nature. It was attempting to just be a new kind of right, an alternative right. It was not for a period of time. In my opinion, it wasn't well formed in terms of the people involved, like Milo Yiannopoulos and people like
Mm-hmm.
that. I don't. He's not a white nationalist or anything like that, but he was a figure of the alt right and tied into that. They've been using alt right as a slur basically ever since. But
Yeah.
that, in my opinion, was to negate any option of sort of a neo right thing happening. But then Trump sort of still happened and made a new Republican Party, so to speak, like the first pro-gay marriage upon entering office, president, as a Republican. Kind of crazy that it wasn't a Democrat first, you think? Like
Sure.
Obama did
Yeah.
it halfway through. So
Yeah.
that there,
Like Obama did it the second term because he needed the votes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and also like a bunch of Democrat politicians made that same move. I think Hillary Clinton was 2013. That's where a lot of people see the Democrats are kind of they. I feel like Democrats almost sometimes like the game of what you're allowed to say and what you actually believe, because
Sure.
there's a lot of like, well, we believe in single payer, but you could never really say it. So it's like we believe in a public option. Like there's a sort of agreed upon. We're only
Well,
going to pull it this far, but we really want to take it this far. Kind of
I think part
built
of it
into
is
that.
if they were to actually enact on the things that they were saying, right? If the things they're saying are getting them votes, and they were to enact on them and make policy that would make this stuff happen, legislate it, what are they going to promise to do the next time they run for a term? There always has to be a boogeyman. There always has to be a reason why it wasn't completed. It's always someone else's fault, and you need to vote for them and donate to them and get them to run to continue to fight this scourge of sexism and bigotry and
Yeah.
white
The,
supremacy.
the
And
the
that's
the best the best political currency is a crisis for sure.
Yeah,
For
absolutely. Yeah,
sure.
you never let a good crisis go to waste. So the crazy thing about it is that if you ever watch, and this is a manipulation tactic. This is one of their manipulation tactics. Because if you ever watch, you have cats?
Yeah, I have one cat, and she's about to have some cats.
Oh, nice. Has you ever watched your cat when they catch like a bug or a mouse or a lizard or something? What do they do with it?
Play with it.
They play with it. They don't just go in for the kill. They play with it because to them the thrill. Once they kill it, they're done. They walk away. And before that, the idea is to prolong this process of cat and mouse going cat. They're predatory. This is a predatory mindset. So these politicians are absolutely out of their mind. They're psychotic. They have a predatory mindset, and they manipulate people. And the way they do that is this whole cat and mouse game, where they're going to go up to the point where they're about to make something happen, and then they can't let it happen. Once it happens, what are they going to? What's the platform they're going to run on the next time they run for office? Well, if they're going to stay in Congress for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they can't allow real change to happen. It is fundamentally against. That's why we need more statesmen rather than politicians, people that will come in, serve their term, do as much good as they can for society, for their countrymen, and then get the hell out of office and go back to a regular life. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much what it was intended for when they wrote that into the Constitution. And this has just been manipulated by establishment cronies. They're all in the same families, the same uh, dynasties, and we basically went from a constitutional republic to an oligarchy rule.
Yeah. So there's this. I want to make 2 points. One, these tie in together actually. Interestingly enough, Judge Andrew Napolitano. He's a pretty well known person. He there's a Latin phrase he brought up one time that described exactly what you're talking about, and so it's in Latin, which means this idea has been around for thousands of years. Libido dominante, I think is how you say it, but it's basically the primal lust, the primal urge, the primal lust to dominate other human beings.
Yes,
That's been with us for a very long time, and that's exactly what you're talking about.
I
Um,
think it's a
and
good
also, what
description,
you're
man.
talking about is there's this thing I just call it institutional decay, where there's the initial vision of the institution, and by definition, from that initial point where they're closest to their original vision, those institutions can only drift away. And so
Yeah,
you have enough drift away, you turn into an oligarchy. The institutions are no longer serving their actual functions, and then you need what I call now, and what we're in, I think, in the middle of, is a populist correction, meaning a realignment of the institutions to their purpose here in America to serve the people. And
sure.
we have to force that populist correction right now. It is not,
Yeah,
they don't want to go quietly, trust me.
no, and they won't. Yeah, the question at this point is it too far gone? Can we do that correction? There's a lot of questions to that, but I think you're correct. This is basically and there is a measurement of what you described right now. There's a way to measure that called the Overton's window. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
Mm-hmm.
So just for the people watching right now, the Overton window is basically a window that's set over a section of the political spectrum. So on the political spectrum, it goes all the way to the far left, which is authoritarian, and all the way to the far right, which is libertarian, to the point of being what's anarchy, which isn't chaos. It's just full autonomy, right? An autonomous civilization. So you'd have full autonomy,
Voluntary opting into external
like
governance.
no government, like no government is all, no government, like no government
Private
involved.
government. Private
Yeah,
government is a better way to
everything's
think about it.
privatized. Yeah, everything's privatized. So from this scale of left to right, the Overton window sits directly over where the mass of the bell curve exists for a specific society, right? So ours started out completely to the right because we had the colonies who were living in a wilderness and basically on their own. It started moving towards a constitutional republic, slowly over to a democracy, and then now becoming an oligarchy. Well, the next part is when you go far to the left, it just becomes an authoritarian dictatorship. So, like, you are here, but they manipulate language in a way to keep us moving slowly to the left. So when people say, how come the Democrat Party is going so far left and the Republicans are shifting slowly left with them, they're not doing anything to stop the Democrats. Well, that's because you're watching the Overton window rule cannot be broken, right? If that happens, country is just going to be split in two completely. But that's not what's happening. Everything is moving left, and you start realizing that when you realize that they're even using the language of the left to describe the left. People on the right have been calling them liberals when they're the antithesis to liberal ideology. Liberals
Yeah.
are open-minded. I still consider myself to be liberal. I believe our forefathers were very liberal, and the idea that to call these commie dirtbags liberals just blows my mind. But we all fall for it. Even Trump does it. Oh, the crazy liberals. No, Trump, you're liberal. These guys are communists. We need to stop using their language. But they're really good at manipulating and getting people to use their language as one of their tactics. So the more that we let them set the framework and we walk into that, that's the Overton window just slowly shifting to the wrong side, you know?
Yeah, basically it's kind of been like a creek with a current, and you're sitting there and you're not like pushing yourself in any direction, so you think you're just kind of there, but we're slowly drifting
Yeah.
along the way. Because the reality is, yeah, those people that want that control will be pushing for it, and will try to keep the masses unaware of that happening for as long as possible. And I do think you're probably, I think you're about 2 stages ahead of where I think I am. I'm in the let's have a mad push to impeach Biden stage. That's where I'm at. Only because I think it gets very, very, very. There's a lot of human suffering in the next few stages if we get too far along. And I do believe in an inside-outside game, so to speak, where it's like when the shit hits the fan, we'll all know. And like you wanted to talk about, we need to be prepared. But
Yes.
until that day shows up, and we'll know when the shit hits the fan. When children start getting taken out of houses, that's probably the marker. If you're looking for the marker, that's the marker to start going to the Capitol and showing up.
Well, I'll tell you this, man. I got a good friend who lives in Sydney, Australia. I talk to him quite often. So guys, for those of you that know what's going on over in Australia right now, Australia is fallen, completely fallen. And right now, Australia is quickly becoming the model for what I believe is the next step in what we call the Great Reset. What's bothersome about that is what you just said right now. Is the marker is going to be watching children being taken out of the home. Well, this is happening in Australia. They're separating 24,000 children from their parents, and they're taking them to an arena where there's police and guards, and they're taking them in there to be vaccinated, and the parents are not allowed inside that arena. So the thing is that...
I want to just say this real quick. I read a ABC News article on this. Our corrupt news institutions are fully on board with this because their refutation or whatever, the way they try to debunk this was to say these baseless rumors are totally baseless rumors and the police say so, and that's why they're baseless rumors. That was literally their entire article in eloquent words and, a whole bunch of fluff and a bunch of this, that, and the other. But that was literally just the article. And I was like, I was a little bit intoxicated, and I was like sometimes I'm like, am I in a dream? Sometimes you see things, and especially over the last 5-6 years, sometimes you're like, this can't be real life, man. This can't be real life. But that's also, like you talked about, the Overton window, or sort of the collective unconscious dream of the masses. Sure. And that's sort of the context, or the sort of the atmosphere in the background that the programming sort of creates. Someone very interesting, she was on the Joe Rogan podcast. She ran as a libertarian. She was a comedian. Roseanne Barr. Roseanne Barr said that Trump broke the spell of the CIA programming, basically, with the way he
Yep.
acted, because he used their institutions to disrupt so much of the narrative structures they were trying to create, because he had like all this experience in all sorts of other arenas, and then was experienced in TV and understood the narrative construction model, so he knew how to sort of reverse engineer it to destabilize it, and I think he
You
successfully
know,
did that.
I could see that. I could 100% see that because the way that he came out, people really believed he was this complete jerk and sexist and all the racist and all this stuff. And it's funny because if you ever see the way he was when the cameras were off, or when he believed cameras were off, or when it wasn't something that was a huge televised event, the people that were around him would say he was just the nicest guy, complete opposite of how you would
Total
perceive him to be.
charming and lovable.
Charming. Yeah, and I've heard this from multiple people. I know several people who know the president closely, and they've all said the same thing to me. I've not heard one person say, "Oh no, it's he's no, he's not the same person that people paint him up to be with the narrative on the media." But he had to have known that that's how it was going to go down because he played into it very well. And I think that the thing is that he kind of was, as an entertainer, was used to playing a persona on television, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially having his own reality TV
Knowing
shows.
how to dial up and dial down the right aspects of himself to appear a certain way.
Yeah, so in a way, he had kind of like that. Everyone said he was an alpha. I think he had more of like a sigma male energy, right? Which is one of the rarest personality types. And he was really able to kind of set the frame and let people believe he was whatever they thought he was, whether they thought he was an alpha or they thought he was something else. I think you said he was just dialing it up and dialing it out, depending on what the situation calls for, whose presence he was in, and what audience he was trying to capture. And that is a dangerous, dangerous man right there.
So what is that?
So,
Please, I only know alpha and beta. I've never gotten, partially because some of the so here, this is my own intellectual failing. When I see weak men trying to pretend like they're not weak men with certain language, like I'm a dark horse alpha back whatever male type thing. I'm like, I'm disinterested. I'm not interested in being that kind of a man, so I just
mhm.
unplug. And so anything beyond the alpha beta sort of concept, I didn't really study because I saw a lot of that being a part of it. But
so
could you
you'll
please illuminate me?
Yeah. So you'll probably get it. You'll probably be really interested in this because honestly, if you don't really know who any Sigma males are in your life, you might be one because it's extremely rare. And the idea of a Sigma male type personality is that you have this hierarchy structure, right? Alphas are always on top. Alphas are always on top. Everyone in society agrees to that. Betas are underneath alphas, right? So the alphas are on top. Alphas are focusing on winning, focusing on themselves. The betas are focusing on the alphas and everything else going on around them, everyone but themselves. And then you have a hierarchy structure even below that. You have omegas. Like you got people that are just last in society. I mean, there's real winners and real losers in this societal hierarchy. The sigma male literally exists outside of the hierarchy. They do not give a shit who the alphas are. They do not give a shit who the betas are. All they care about, and this is the thing, is that they're very astute in observing people. They can recognize details of other personality types, even if they're completely unaware of the hierarchy. They know who the betas are. They know who the alphas are. The problem with the alphas is the alphas have to be on top. So when the alpha is the one leading the pack, if anybody challenges that, their ego is bruised instantly. They go into full panic mode. The alpha has to be on top. They cannot lose. They hate it. The beta is used to losing, but also hates it. You know what I'm saying? But they're used to it. So somebody tells them sit down and puts them in their place, they're going to sit down in their place even if they don't like it. The sigma male will let you pretend to be will pretend to let you think you're the alpha and you put him in his place. But in his mind, he doesn't care. Like it doesn't affect him the same way it's going to affect the beta because the beta's just going to take it. The sigma male already has a plan. The sigma male already has his route created for himself. He's already figured that out. And it doesn't matter if you think he's on top or not. He's completely unaffected by societal views of this hierarchy, which is completely manufactured, right? Because a beta can become an alpha male overnight. An alpha male could become a beta overnight. This is not like locked in place personality types. You know what I'm saying? Things can break a man or build a man up. It's all about mindset. And the sigma male is somebody who is more adaptable in that way because like I said about, like you said about Trump, the way he's able to dial in, dial up, dial down, and really just present himself to however the situation falls for it. And this is something that is actually taught in Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War. So in Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War, he mentions something about making your enemy believe you're strong when you're weak and making your enemy believe you're weak when you're strong. Why would you care? Like, if you looked at military might in a certain way, you'd be like, well, look at all these people out here, these militaries from around the world, great militaries. Think about Hannibal, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, right? The Soviet Union, the Allies, the Axis powers, and all them. The idea was to always appear that you were strong, always appear mighty, always appear like you had this world power, even if it wasn't true, right? They always needed to have that appearance that, like, hey, I'm the big, you know what, in the room, and trying to make it known that way. Everybody wants to be the alpha or pretend to be the alpha. The Sigma mindset, Sigma male personality type, literally doesn't care how you perceive them. If it's not, all that matters is how it's going to be advantageous to him. So if somebody wants to think you're a bitch, that's fine. That's what you are to them, because it plays out to your advantage if you can manipulate that person. So someone else wants to step in the room and be the alpha.
Trump was considered a fool in the beginning by many people.
Exactly.
And then he became a danger.
Yes. Once he got in, nobody expected him to win. Even the Republicans had they didn't like him very much. And Fox
I was
News,
supporting him, and I didn't think it would happen. I was like, I thought everyone else thought it had no chance. I thought it had a chance, but it was just unlikely. The odds were not in his favor.
That's how I thought, yeah. But honestly, he did a really good job in dialing in and letting people believe that he was whatever they thought he was. It's still that way to this day, because you got people who really believe this guy was like the worst thing that ever happened, and tons of people who really believe this guy was like the best thing that ever happened. The truth is, he's somewhere in between, right? We know he wasn't the worst. We know he's probably wasn't the very best, but to everybody, he was able to dial in and become whatever it is they needed at the time. And to me, that's not an alpha. The alpha would have had his ego bruised so hard that he wasn't the best to everybody all the time in every situation, that it would have bruised his ego when that wasn't the case. But Trump didn't care about whether or not you thought about him as an alpha. He served a role to each of these people, each of these scenarios, and that role, he played it out perfectly every time. That's a Sigma personality type. That is one of the rarest of them all.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because, I believe that because even in moments where it would have made sense, like sometimes he would fight in a situation where it didn't make sense because it served the higher purpose of fighting is what needs to be happening right now, even if it's at this moment. So it doesn't make sense. So like I saw a lot of things with Trump where it seemed like he was sort of applying broader principles than the specific situation necessarily would call for, because he had 50-something years ahead of time to sort of think about how he would, he was the son of a very rich man in the 1970s. So he's known, and it's an intelligent family. If you here's the thing, whatever you think about Trump, if everyone around him is extremely intelligent, what the hell do you think he is, right? Genetically speaking, like unless he's an anomaly, but still somehow massively successful. Like that's the thing, like how can a moron do all this accidentally? Like, because morons don't do that accidentally. No. Morons don't do that ever. So,
that's the thing too. I think what you touched on right now. You know who John G. Trump is?
Yeah, exactly, sir. I just listened to a lecture, old MIT from the Vault video interview of him. That dude was something else, and that dude was like peak of his era, peak of his era type.
Donald spent a lot of time with his Uncle John, bro. He was just as much an influence on him as his father was.
Yep. It's an interesting line of inquiry to go down, but a crazy one too. Like being fully honest. Like you could get into some.
We'll have to save that for another live, man. We can go down a bunch of those rabbit
your inference patterns and your ability to piece things together, and you start looking into that stuff, it gets interesting, infinitely interesting, almost immediately. So everyone should look into that.
Just starting out, you'll probably be like 2 degrees away from Trump as a time traveler or something.
Literally, literally, it's like stuff. It could be. but it's also like I feel like a crazy person, but
Yeah,
whatever.
that's fun sometimes.
So you talked about this. It's interesting, the Sigma male thing. I felt disconnected. Like I didn't have the words as a Sigma male for this, but I literally said I feel totally disconnected from the hierarchy from a young age in school, sitting there in high school. I was like, every path they have laid out for me doesn't mean shit to me. I have no interest in it. My brothers will know I've been saying this for a decade now. Like 12 years to be a doctor and be in crazy debt and do whatever. 12 years to be a lawyer and sell yourself out to argue for bullshit legally one way or the other. Like all this stuff. Like I ended up being a car detailer because I could just listen to stuff and learn things 7-8 hours a day and and I got paid pretty well to do it. So it was a good thing for me. But I felt so alone and almost like fucked up. Like there's no other word for it. I felt like something was deeply wrong with me by having a disconcern for and it's not that I don't value the hierarchy, but I do feel detached from it. I don't like, and that's kind of the
You
beauty. That
value it
might
when
be
it
the
suits
beauty.
you, right? You value it when it suits you, right? There's
I
situations
value
where
it when
you
I see value in it. It's a
yeah.
value judgment on the hierarchy itself. And yeah, so for the higher order goal, for the goal of doing all this politics stuff, being persuasive kind of matters, and like trying to speak to people and meet them where they are, and things that, like, I'm doing a lot of things for the sake of a higher order goal that I would not do for the sake of just my own life or my own decisions. So I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, but what I was trying to get at was just that, um, like you said, sometimes an alpha isn't a proper alpha and shouldn't be in the alpha position. Or when they get challenged and
Yeah.
they're a corrupt person, and sometimes a beta takes it when they really shouldn't take it. So sometimes a beta shouldn't be a beta. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do feel like I have my own personality, and then I will force myself out of my own personality when the situation calls for it. If I need to be the asshole in the situation, I can be the asshole in the situation. If I need to be the kind, compassionate, understanding person, and it's all, in my opinion, through the lens of authenticity. I try to, like, it's very tricky to think of this without thinking of it as manipulative, because like, if you're upfront about the goals of what you're doing, and you are just trying to aim for those goals, I don't think it's manipulation. There's no trickery in what I'm doing, but I am trying to be persuasive. I am oriented around this goal. And when you have to beef people up, or beef people up basically from the bottom positions, when you have to, because they're not quite in their position correctly, or when you have to go knock an alpha out of their position, like I feel like that I have that flexibility to a certain degree. Like
Yeah, that's
I
something
feel like
that
the alphas, the people in charge, need to be knocked out so I can warp myself into the kind of person that can do that, basically. And 3 years ago I wasn't that person. So
yeah, so some of the things that you said are pretty spot on with the Sigma personality type. Like, there's a couple things that you can look into with the Sigma male personality types to see if you actually fit that model. It is extremely rare, but one of the main characteristics is that it's hard for uh, women to be in a relationship with a Sigma male because they'll be super attracted to them because of the characteristics that they share with on the level of an alpha male, but they don't like the fact that the Sigma male has his own route already carved out for him. He already has he kind of disconnects from, what society tries to put in place for him. This can be something that's like disheartening at times because they will persistently. Sometimes it looks like you sabotage yourself, right? But what it is really, that the path you're on is not where you want to be going, and you're gonna end up like making rash decisions, right? And so this can be something that to a lady will be like, oh, it's kind of like it looks like instability. But no, it's what it is you know where you're going, and sometimes you have to make those rash decisions. So it looks like you're sabotaging yourself, but you just the path isn't always clear. The goal is clear, the destination's clear, the path is not always clear. Another thing too is like if you have some type of things that you are profoundly considering, you're not necessarily going to speak openly to anybody about them until you feel you have it figured out first. And with a lot of people around you, they'll just think that you're closing them off or that you're angry or that this or you're that, or why are you spending too much time by yourself? And but what it is you're not ready to really express those things until you fully have gone through the thought process and the thought experiments yourself that you're comfortable with doing that. So there's a time that comes that you may be doing that, but in the meantime, people are just like, why is he closing himself off from everybody? They'll get worried about you or something like that. That's a real common characteristic of the Sigma male. So yeah, man. I mean, if you want, you guys can look it up on YouTube. There's plenty of videos, even though there's a lot of videos about alphas and betas all over the place. You'll find some videos that go into very deep descriptions of the Sigma personality type as well. And like I said, it's one of the rarest personality types. But I pretty much when I watch those videos, because I watch all this stuff with the alphas, betas, and I'm like, I'm not. This doesn't apply to me all the time. Like I honestly don't care if somebody thinks that I'm an alpha or not. And it's strange because I've, had personal experiences in my life where it was like I knew that I could be the one that was on top, but I don't give a shit about being on top. And now I'm changing my mindset where I am like, okay, I'm going to do something. I'm doing more now. I'm making connections. I've made political connections, business connections. I'm starting to make music again. I always did music as a hobby, and I used to tell people would always tell me all the time, like, dude, where can I buy your music? Like, your music is fire. Like, I'm like, dude, I have no interest in making money and making music and doing tours and shows, and like, I don't care. They're like, but you're so dope. I was like, I appreciate
Yeah.
it, but I don't
No,
care.
yeah, the thing that Charlie Kirk thing you sent me, that was
Yeah,
fire shit, man, for sure. And
thanks, man.
I just want to cut you off real quick right here and just say I can sympathize with that, and I would also just say you just have to try to separate yourself from the money
Hmm.
in some way, like not obsess over it too much, but that shouldn't keep you from offering it and letting people sort of support you. You could do the indirect thing
Oh
with
yeah,
like
yeah.
Patreon type stuff, or also you can just build a team around you of people that will systematize all the parts of it you don't want to handle, and then
Sure. Yeah.
just let them do it.
I
That's what I
actually
want to do with
that's another
with
thing. I got a lot of experience with systems and stuff like that too, because like I did sales and marketing for so long. I used to work for Facebook, man.
no.
I got a
Okay.
yeah, I got a lot of friends. What I do as a trade is I'm a copywriter, and I also do
Hmm.
sales. I work with digital creators and course creators and entrepreneurs, and I work with a personal friend of mine I met at Facebook. He has a digital agency. They've handled like $100 million in ad spend plus over a couple of years. I mean, really successful people. And the thing is that it's to me, it wasn't about trying to avoid making the money or like I thought that it would be. I wasn't sure at first. That was one of those things that I closed people off to when I was like, I wasn't really sure how to explain it. It's not like I believed that making money off of music was bad. It was that
Hmm.
making music was something that was so therapeutic and healing for me. It was like I considered it one of my hobbies, and I was just like, I make
It was just for
music.
you.
I make it for me, bro. And when I make music for me, I make good music and it makes me happy. And if I had like a huge fan base, I would feel like I'm making music for others and that maybe there's a little pressure on there now and it might take the fun away from it for me. So I had to
Mhm.
protect what I thought was most sacred for myself. So I avoided it. But now I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm over it. And I'm telling myself like, okay, that thought served me well for a while. It protected my it was in my interest. Now maybe it is time to make money. Maybe it is time to reach out to people. Maybe it's time to have a base of followers and touch as many people as I can with my music. And I don't have any apprehensions about doing that now, man. I'm gonna put it out there and just work on it and see what happens.
Well, that's awesome. That's amazing to hear. I'm happy to hear it for sure. And yeah, I mean, that's absolutely how it should be. I think it's absolutely important to have, like, for me, I've been studying politics like pretty intensely as I could. I took a year and a half because I learned enough for it to give me a panic attack, and I had to take a break, and then I got back into it. But and I learned to make it more about policy and less about looking at every bad thing the intelligence community has ever been a part of,
Yeah,
because that's just a depressing ass day you're gonna find yourself in.
yeah. I think I had a year and a half long anxiety attack once I got to that point, man. Like I didn't
Yeah,
know
exactly.
what to think. I was like, fuck, they're reptilians or
And it's
something.
so big. It's such a big system. You're like,
Yeah.
how are you gonna like orient yourself to try to take this thing on?
Yeah,
You know,
don't
and
you don't. That's the mistake, and that's the mistake you especially can make as a Sigma, which are usually highly intelligent, where it's like everything has to make sense, and when it doesn't, it bothers the shit out of you. And these are one of those things where it's just like Nah, you're not gonna make it make sense, dude. Just step
On that
back a little
last
bit.
on that last podcast, I literally just said I've spent 10 years thinking, and now I'm going to spend 10 years executing. That I'm
That
like what the
that's the
fuck,
ticket.
bro?
That's
But
the
it's the
ticket,
truth.
bro.
It's the
Yeah,
truth. When I turned 17, 18, and I knew the responsibility of who to vote for fell to me, I couldn't let the easy answers sit there. I couldn't let the questions I had be left alone. There was that extra layer, and eventually I'd have to get around to it because like
yeah,
I'd have to pursue it. I get it. Like I engaged at a young age with disagreements. Like I was willing to just completely buy into the risk of a total terrible disagreement. You know, they call you every name of the book or whatever. Worst case scenario, right?
sure.
If in the course of the conversation I'm going to learn something, they're going to learn something, and as long as I'm like being reasonable and a nice person and I'm self-aware enough to know that's what I'm doing or what I'm trying to do, I risked I invited many conversations that got spicy, but
Sure.
I learned a lot in each of those conversations. The spicier they were, the more substantive they tended to be.
You
Usually
know, I
people
feel
that didn't have if you know a lot about politics, you're more likely to defend what you know, and if you know nothing, you're more likely to just like be welcoming to whatever information someone will give you. I've noticed that.
sure.
Like the people that are in the first 5% of knowledge are like whatever, and then like once you're 15% in, you're like, I've got my team now.
Yeah, you kind of know where you're at. What you're doing is you're just like getting your bearings, you know. Because when you first get into everything, it's just like my perceptions and my labels I put on myself switched over time, right? So I went from being like social justice warrior, which I never used that term, but I went from being like social justice warrior to being like, okay, maybe I'm more libertarian. Once I started, like, I read John Stossel's book, Give Me a Break, and
Nice.
I started getting more into like libertarian perspectives of things. He introduced me to that. Then I started following Ron Paul. It was over after I found Ron
You know what's
Paul.
funny? Penn Jillette was my intro to libertarianism.
Yeah, the magician.
Yep.
Yeah,
He
dude,
was my guy.
100%.
He was an atheist that was compassionate and genuinely cared about people, and so he intrigued me as a person himself, as a man.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, it was different for me because I grew up Christian and it was kind of a foreign concept. So
yeah, he's an
that kind of
incredibly
got me into
interesting guy, dude.
libertarianism.
Yeah, he's an incredibly interesting persona, bro. I'm a huge fan of Penn and Teller since I was a kid. I'm a huge fan of magic and
Mm-hmm.
illusions, and those guys were definitely in my top three. So yeah, and then but yeah, so after discovering Ron Paul and all that, I started going even further down this libertarian to I guess now what they refer to as paleo libertarian, and then eventually like becoming like ANCAP, and now I've kind of circled back. There's that word again. Kind of circled back a little bit, and I feel like I do believe in government structure, somewhat, some limited form of government. I think it serves a purpose. And the problem is that we're always going to have, it's human beings are involved, man. They're wild cards, man. These people on this planet, I'm telling you, bro, they're just wild cards. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know what's in a man's heart. So it's really hard to keep government in check when government is made up of the people. That's one thing I agree with Joe Biden on. He said, we, the government, is we, the people. Well, that's the problem. That's the problem. It's
Yeah.
how do you get
When
people to
people
act
know you
right?
need them, they can take advantage of you.
Yeah, the problem is you can't force people to act right, man. It goes both ways. The government can't get us all to behave, and we're never going to get the government in check because it's all just people, and everyone kind of does their own thing and has their own perspectives. And what's the answer to it all? Well, it's not simple, and that's one of the things that drives the Sigmas crazy, right? Because we wish there was a simple answer. We thought we were so close to figuring it out too, right? Just end up fucking losing our sanity over it. But that's kind of where we're at right now. It's like, all right, we recognize there should be a form of limited government, but we're not going to be able to always keep corruption in check, man. It's got to be a vigilant night watch, all the time. We got to have a we just got to teach people to be vigilant and pay attention, and that's what we should teach. That's what I'm going to be teaching my daughter. That's what I teach everybody I come in contact with, my nieces and nephews, their friends. I've red pilled a lot of people, and especially young people, because that's the most important. And the number one thing I teach them is just like don't be complacent with what you think you know. Don't just take the word of anybody, your parents, the government, authority figures. Like, you're going to have to blaze your own path, and it's scary, I tell people this: look, start looking, start researching, start getting into stuff. Look up the information, and I'm going to tell you something. No matter what you find, how absolutely, utterly horrifying it is, don't ever stop. That's my advice.
That's brilliant advice. I like it. I like it a lot. It's interesting because you talked about kind of going to the ANCAP and then circling back and feeling like there are some things and they're not being answers. I feel like I did come to some concrete answers. That's the only reason why I jumped into the political game, because I felt like I got onto some interesting, unique shit. My basic theory is just this, that and the reason why I'm a moderate is because I believe that the right and the left, so in any free, open democracy, a right and a left emerge, and it's a traditional individual personal responsibility and duty oriented right, and it's a moving past tradition. Tradition doesn't mean shit. Always being compassionate and sort of what the collective compassionate perspective is towards individuals, and then what the individual's duty is towards upholding the parts of the system that work, the traditional system. And so it's always like a conservative and progressive binary, and you're always, and politics is the art of what is working and what do we keep in place and what do we need to evolve and change, and then what is good change and what is bad change and all that kind of stuff. So I believe that and also the reason why I believe that is because personality science shows that there's a 1/3 to 1/2 of personality preferences are determined by personality traits, and it's much more, are you more compassionate or are you more personally responsible and dutiful in your orientation as a personality? And and most people are average in terms of personality traits. Those are hyper specialized versions. So literally the masses are moderate. The masses have average sensibilities is the best way to understand it. So we need to adopt that moderate perspective and try to integrate the two sides and create a cohesive, social fabric as best we can.
I'll tell you what, I attend a lot of political meetings locally here, and I see the same thing happening on the national level that's happening on the local level. So I go to my local GOP county club meeting, and I'm sitting here, and they're talking about how many precinct committeemen that they've added this, election cycle, and how many voters getting registered. And I'm like, this is really cool. It looks like they're making progress, but they're showing me 3 sets of data when they do this, right? They're showing the Democrats' numbers, they're showing their numbers, and they have a third column that says other. That other is usually as large or larger than either of the political parties' registration, right? You have these non-registered voters. They're registered to vote, but they're not registered for either party. They're moderates. They're people that exist within a bell curve. Now, even within the parties, you have moderates, right? So that would mean that on the two sides of this political spectrum, the ones that are far out on the fringe are actually the minority. And as you start moving in towards the moderates inside those parties, you start kind of going, the numbers of the people that in those areas start going up. So you reach the center, which is the highest number of non-registered or non-partisan voters in the center. And it creates what I call a bell curve, right? Most of us exist within the center of this bell curve. So the problem that I think that partisan rhetoric and partisan politics and practices proposes is that they're constantly trying to appeal to the people on the fringe and take them further away from the other side. But they're missing out on a very good opportunity to be able to expand not only the amount of people that would vote for good, solid policy, but having good, well-informed voters influencing the party's direction, if they were to literally turn their direction towards trying to attract more of these people that are moderates. But the reason that they don't do that is because they have to become more moderate themselves to appeal to them, and that's the problem. The parties are going to be towing that party line, and you can literally be ostracized for not doing that once you register a party. This is why I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm not a registered Republican. I'll always be independent. If it means
I would like to point out, and this is why I feel like I'm allied with the right in the moment. Yeah. Maybe in 2000 with Bush and his wars and Clinton and that impeachment, I think I would have been on the other side. But they in 2016 they let Trump in, and they are open to being overthrown. Basically, the establishment, sort of crappy, corrupt figures on the Republicans, they are on the chopping block. We can knock them out and replace them with better people. The Democrats, you ain't got no shot.
Well,
You
it's
have
already
no
happened.
chance of perforating that team.
The problem is it's already happened with the Democrats.
What do
You've
you
been
mean?
watching. Well, think about it like this, man. The Democrats have already been infiltrated by a group of progressives because the moderate Democrats
Oh,
and
oh,
the
yeah. So what I
they're
mean is that the Democrats are taken over by them, and like there's no
already,
one
yeah,
else getting in. Is what I mean. I'm 5 seconds away from them
sure.
cutting us off. We'll have to
Okay,
hop
cool.
back on.